you hit with your $20 a year. You're hit with the increase in the price of your groceries. You're hit with the increase in anything that's transported by public transportation, by trucks or anything else like that. Bad idea in a time when the economy is not that good. There are an awful lot of people out of work. They're barely making ends meet. And I think your tax policies are bad for Massachusetts.
Jim, if I might.
I was going to say about the infrastructure, though. He does make a good point. The MBTA right now is facing unsustainable cost increases because of the big dig. I mean, a lot of that is because of the big dig. We haven't been able to invest in infrastructure. So to his point, if it's only $24 more, and I'm not saying I'm in favor of it, but if it's only going to cost $24 more per person to raise $126 million, I mean, how do we pay for infrastructure improvements in the state that have been long delayed, and we have to start retiring some of this debt?
Well, I think
what do we do?
We need to start being better stewards of our money. The MBTA is a great example. They have hired over 900 new employees in the last 2 years when they're threatening to cut costs, cut services and increase fares. They have over 600 employees now that make over $100,000 a year. They have uncollected fares, and nobody knows how much it is, but they have a lot of money that enough people that jump the tolls and don't put the money in and all of this. That's all on a paper that's been written about it. There are things that we need to do. I proposed at a meeting in Lexington where Mr. Barrett spoke that we do a full audit of the MBTA and see where the money's going before we give them anything else to spend, before we give them any more of our hard-earned tax dollars.
Now, Jim, I'm going to gently and respectfully ask Sandi to cite the source of that suggestion that we've added 700, 800 jobs at the T. I've never heard that number before.
It was in the Boston Herald.
I want it fact-checked because it's very important. This is what I can say overall. And I'm not saying that I know she's sincere, so I'm sorry, Sandi, I know you're sincere. I don't mean to talk over you. But I would respectfully differ. I do know where state employment as a whole, the T included, has trended since for any number of years back, because you and I had a debate about this last night, so I checked my figures. We employ today as a state government, including the MBTA, 15% fewer workers, no matter how we measure it, than we did in 2007, the year before the fiscal crash. And what happened is that when the federal fiscal stimulus monies were available to us from the federal government, there were a couple of years where state employment went up as it was supposed to. But it's gone down because that federal stimulus money is exhausted. So today we sit 15% below employment levels compared to 2007, the year before the crash. And by the way, I think some of that is necessary. You have to get smaller when the economy slows down. There's no two ways about it. The state has to balance its budget, Jim, as you know, every year, unlike the feds. So we don't run a deficit. We actually pay as we go. And if there's fewer tax monies available because the economy worldwide has slowed down, we employ fewer people. What else can you do? So Massachusetts actually has been a rather responsible steward here. We have a smaller state government, and I brought the numbers, by the way, for that. We have a smaller state government.
But Michael, you raise a good point, okay? You're talking, now you sound like a moderate Democrat, okay? You ought to raise taxes, the gas tax, but now you're saying we need a smaller government during bad economic times. And yet, this budget that was passed by the legislature, $32.5 billion. Do you remember what the budget was in 1987 when you first went into the legislature?
I entered the government for the very first time in 1979. Okay, I am dating myself, and no, I don't.
Well, I looked it up in 1987. It was $10.8 billion. Okay.
And as you know, I'm sorry.
And I'm not saying, I'm not saying, okay, it goes up during the years, but it's $32 billion, over 200% increase.
So the number of people employed, here's the amazing thing, and the number of people employed has gone down, as I just indicated, and that comes from the comptroller's office.
Yes,
so you and I kind of know where the spending is. It's healthcare.
Okay.
40% of the state budget, a larger percentage by far than ever in the past, goes to Medicaid and health insurance for public employees. So if we were to take a look at private sector increases in spending for that same time period, that too would have gone up because all of us are being banged with the cost of health care, and it's not a state service. It's not something, in fact, it's private sector doctors, private sector insurance companies, private sector hospitals that account for the increase in cost, but that's where the spending by and large comes from.
Sandy, $15.1 billion of that $32 billion budget is going to healthcare right now. Okay, it is 43% of the budget. I checked it today. Okay, now, even if we all agree that the universal health care plan that was started under Romney with a bipartisan effort was a good thing, we haven't been able to control costs. The governor is trying to do that right now. Okay, 2 business people in the room here. That is unsustainable, 6 to 7% per year.
Yes, it is.
What do we do to try to corral those increases in healthcare?
We have to try to identify what's causing the increases, I would think. I know that when I'm talking to business owners up and down Moody Street, one of the things that many of them talked about was the fact that the cost of their health care has not just, gone up 10% or 20%. In some cases it's doubled, in some cases it's tripled. And I talked to one small business owner, a woman, who said she and her husband were not only going to be able to not hire new people that they really needed to grow their business, but if they went over the 10 employees, they would have to pay for their health care, so they were letting people go just to make ends meet. The health care costs are crippling small business owners, and I disagree with you that small businesses are not fleeing the state. When I get home, I will get the links and I will send them to you.
Okay.
All right. I think that people are hurting across the district. People are out of work. Kids getting out of college with their degrees can't find jobs. My understanding is that the unemployment rate among recent college graduates is around 50%. High school kids can't find jobs because those that are over 50 or 60 that can't find work are taking the menial jobs because the business owners know that they're not going to be going off somewhere else shortly. They'll be there for them. And so we've got to give relief to the taxpayer here in Massachusetts, to the young people and to the seniors.
Fundamentally, do you agree with the universal health care law that Massachusetts implemented?
Well, let's put it this way. My understanding, according to Mitt Romney's words, is the bill that he signed is not what we're running under now. That when it was implemented by the Democratic legislature, they made all kinds of changes to it. I haven't gone and looked at that. There's been a whole bunch of other things going on, but I take him at his word that it was not what he intended initially. I can't even remember some of the differences between this and Obamacare, except that ours is a much smaller bill.
Well, Obamacare is going to add more costs.
Oh, it's going to add more
I think let's
Michael, but look, as a businessman and a legislator, okay, if you're elected, okay, any ideas about healthcare?
I think what we're paying for healthcare, Jim, as you put it, is unsustainable, and I think Sandy and I would agree with that.
Absolutely.
Those aren't monies we're paying to government, though, and that has nothing to do with the size of government. That has to do with monies we're paying to private sector providers of health insurance. And we are going to have to switch the way that we pay for that stuff. Right now, it's fee-for-service. Mm-hmm. So if you're a doc and you can do an additional surgery, you make more money. If you're a hospital and you can have additional folks there in terms of length of stay, you make more money, with a few exceptions that we could note because of cost containment changes. Fundamentally, we have to pay doctors and hospitals differently. To take care of you for 90 days for a set fee, if you go back into the emergency room after you've been discharged from the hospital, that means somebody's mismanaged your care. No additional money, even if they have to do additional procedures. 90 days to make Jim Campanini well, and to make sure he goes into the hospital when necessary, but doesn't go back into the ER with exacerbations. So I'm in favor of a move from I get paid for every time I do another operation on Jim to, wow, I get paid a set sum to keep Jim healthy.
This is the global payment plan?
That's exactly right. This is capitation, global payment, bundled payment. It goes by a number of names. But the critical thing is that my incentives change. And by the way, remember, I work with the visiting nurse associations. I know healthcare pretty well, and I know healthcare finance pretty well. I think I can really contribute to the legislature being smart about this stuff. Right now, the home health, the Greater Lowell VNA is paid a 90-day sum to keep you well, or a 60-day sum. You get one set amount to make sure that that person in her home after a hospital discharge gets well and doesn't go back into the hospital. And so you're incentivized not to do more, and not even to hope that she gets sick so that you can collect an additional fee. The incentives are aligned, and you're really motivated to keep her well, because the less you actually spend while keeping somebody well, let's say your mom, the rest of that 90-day payment you've been given is profit or revenue that you get to retain.
The only
That's a different system, but it's a radically different way to pay doctors and hospitals. It is a way to start to bring healthcare cost increases down. I know a decent amount, as I say, about healthcare economics. I really want to go back into the Senate with the private sector healthcare experience I have, because we've got to get our arms around this. This is scary stuff.
anything you want to add on that? Healthcare or?
One of the things that I'd like to share is that I think having a one-size-fits-all healthcare plan, which is what my opponent supports. He wants to see single-payer healthcare. I think we need to have cafeteria-style plans that you have young people who perhaps don't have the great need for the catastrophic insurance. I mean, for the average everyday things, and they would like to just get a catastrophic plan. I think people should be allowed to shop over state lines to get their insurance. I think we need to put some competition into the system.
But you're talking about the federal level.
No, I'm talking even at the
Well, the
state.
feds will have to
Well, they have
agree
to agree to it. I
of course,
agree.
for competition.
But I think if the states demand it, and if the states, which I think most of the states would like to, if they push hard, the government would have to comply, or we change Congress.
Okay, just getting off the subject, back to one tax issue that's on your website. You would like to lower the income tax rate.
Well, the people demanded it.
Okay, so you talk about it's now what 5.3%,
Mm-hmm.
5.3. You want to go right down to 5%, right?
I do.
Which was passed in the 2000 election. Okay, why is that a good thing?
Again, people are hurting. People are taxed enough already. When you add up all the taxes, there's a cute little song, I don't know if you've seen it out on the internet, and tax you this and tax you that and tax you this and this and that. It goes into every single thing that people are being taxed on right now. When you buy a product, it's taxed, the raw goods to make it are taxed. Then you have a tax when it's coming out of the factory. Then you get another tax when it's sold to you in the store. If you add up all the taxes that we're currently paying, we're probably paying well over 50% of our income just in taxes. And I think 5% is a reasonable amount. The people voted on it. It was a ballot initiative, I think, wasn't it initially? The people demanded that it be 5%, and our legislature has been dragging its feet and playing with it going up and down over the last several years. And I think the people want relief.
What do you think about that?
Well, actually, the tax rate is going down, but it is going down, it's true, in a kind of measured, conservative way, not in a radical way. It was at 5.3% when the state needed to balance its budget. Then it's came down to 5.25%. I actually think it's on the cusp of going down to 5.2%. To reduce it immediately from 5.25% to 5% would be $600 million, just like that, out of the state budget. Now, most of the state budget, it all goes to domestic programs. We don't conduct any wars. We don't support a military. The state budget is all domestic spending. And 40% of it, 43% of it is health care. Imagine taking $600 million, Jim, overnight out of a state budget, which goes primarily to supporting health care, state public higher ed, and local aid for local schools. Who do you think is going to get zapped if Sandi takes $600 million off the pile?
Okay, but do you see any
Of
areas
course.
that could be cut?
Sure. I mean, we were just, there's no question. Remember, I've been in the private sector. I'm not happy with what state government is doing. If I were happy, I wouldn't have run. I declared against an incumbent. I declared against Susan Fargo. I didn't think she was doing a great job by Chelmsford. And I saw things going on, and I don't blame Susan, though, for this in the least, but I saw things going on like the probation department, where you had a patronage-ridden operation connected to a few legislative leaders, an operation, by the way, that went on under Governor Romney, and the Republican governors, they looked the other way as well as the Democrats. We had 4 Republican governors in a row, and during that period, this probation department patronage scandal with all kinds of legislators putting their friends into jobs.
Mike, I think there was I think the House Speaker and the Senate President had a lot to do with that.
That's true, and they were Democrats, I will confess.
So it was a bipartisan effort.
Thank you. It was a bipartisan effort. They all worked together, and of course, I don't like to see that sort of stuff.
What would you cut right now? If there's anything that you see identified as waste right now in the $32 billion budget, what do you?
Well, of course there is.
Reduce.
I'm interested in taking a new look at an old issue that I addressed years ago, and that was county government. county government, which used to be a kind of a Cambridge and even kind of a Lowell thing, was a source of incredible political patronage in its later days, right? So we abolished with I'm a former Mass Municipal Association Legislator of the Year. I led the fight against political patronage. I'm a goo-goo, as they say up in sales, a good government guy, sort of a bipartisan fellow who believes in spending money for decent causes and feels a lot of pressure to cut money precisely because I believe that government does have a role. So when I see waste, as I did in county government, I lead the charge to try to get politics out of the system. I want to make sure the probation department is thoroughly reformed. And that's something of very recent vintage. I want to take a new look at county government where it continues to exist in Western Mass.
I thought we eradicated county
No, only in Eastern Massachusetts, east of Worcester. So of course there are real areas where we can look. And by the way, because I have worked on the MBTA issue for years and have addressed waste in the old days, and sometimes it's the Friends of Democrats, sometimes it's the labor unions who are responsible for waste. They're trying to preserve jobs because they're concerned about layoffs. You have to sort of sympathize. Sometimes, though, the taxpayer can't afford to carry unproductive workers in the public sector. So I've even begged to differ with my friends in the public employee unions when they, in the old days, kept too many people employed on the MBTA, the Carmen's Union. I've spent a lot of time taking a tough look at spending because I think government has a role, and I want Democrats to be credible when we talk about taxes and when we talk about the need for services. I want us to have some balance, and to me that means that I also focus on areas of waste. And the Carmen's Union and county government are two areas that led me to be named again the Legislator of the Year by the Mass Municipal Association, which is cities and towns in Massachusetts.
Okay.
It's not state government.
No filibustering. That's good. Sandi, where would you cut? Have you identified anything?
Well, one of the first things we would cut would be the governor's office in D.C. It's, I believe, around $432,000 immediately off the top that you could get rid of. Several years ago, in 2009, the GOP identified 10 specific cuts that they would go after, and a lot of them have to do with towns that put in requests to the state for a parking lot or for a sidewalk or whatever. A lot of things that are important to people at the time, but when you're in a fiscal crisis, they're nice to have maybe someday when we have the money. There was one of the ones, $100 million could be saved by moving, and I'm going to leave this to you to qualify this, moving the mass health fee for service to Medicaid. The Republicans took a look at that and said you could save $100 million a year by just that simple thing. We could charge a $5 fee for prisoners in our prison system. We could conduct an audit of state lands that we could sell to bring more revenue into the state, and there's a bunch of other things where you could cut as well.
Okay.
Now let me just point out that we're always interested in moving things onto Medicaid because the feds reimburse Medicaid 50%, but the feds have a veto over what we move. They know the game, and they don't want to see us reclassify something as a Medicaid expenditure so that they're suddenly on the tab for 50%. We have hard fights on our hands.
Well,
every
actually,
time
it's
we
going to
do that.
become more acute because
That's
when
exactly
they
right.
take out $717 billion from Medicare,
Right.
okay, it's going to fall on the states to make up that difference if they don't want to cut reimbursement rates to their community hospitals.
Yeah.
But okay, I think we've. I want to just move on to one thing where the Lowell Sun has been fiscally conservative throughout the years. We're not really. We understand you have to tax in some places. You have to raise revenue to fund government. But one of the few taxes that I see out there that is low-hanging fruit is this Main Street fairness tax. And you people are both in business. It's called the internet sales tax. Okay, we've had
Absolutely.
There's been studies done by the Pioneer Institute and other think tanks saying there's about $395 million on the table right now if you were to charge an internet sales tax on these big box retailers like Amazon.com, which are in Cambridge because they have to have a physical presence in the state. Just Amazon.com would be $35 million. And yet the governor has failed to look at this. It's been on his desk for a while, and this has been ignored. Would you be in favor of charging the internet sales tax?
I am not in favor of any tax increase or any new added taxes. I've taken a no new tax pledge, the Citizens for Limited Taxation pledge, so I would not be in favor of it.
But doesn't this hurt businesses like yourself, or even downtown retailers in Chelmsford? I know it hurts them in Lowell when they have to compete against Amazon.com, and people can just go buy the same product and not pay a sales tax. So they
Well,
have to
people
pay it.
are going to New Hampshire already to avoid the sales tax, and we're not suggesting that we should put a toll booth on the gates going up to New Hampshire to stop people from going there. Or I know at one point in time we were sending police to follow people with video cameras to see what they were buying and nabbing them once they came over the border. I think when you pit businesses against the individual who is looking right now, people are desperate to save money. And for us to say, well, we're going to take away your ability to save money when you buy over the internet, I think is perhaps the wrong approach right now for people.
So I beg to differ. This is an area where Sandi and I disagree significantly. I'm in the internet business, remember. My specialty is the uses of the internet for healthcare, but that includes selling healthcare products. And I think absolutely there has to be a level playing field. If I pay a sales tax when I buy a medical device from a local drugstore, and I can get it, and it's true, I can get it without the sales tax over the internet, that really results in discrimination against local businesses. And I think there was an argument 10 years ago when I first became involved in the internet that the internet was so new that we ought to feel our way and there ought to be a kind of forgiveness period. That was the articulated reason for not moving immediately to tax interstate sales of devices. But now we're familiar with the internet. That honeymoon is over. We now see that Amazon is putting local bookstores out of business and that there are hundreds of analogs. And so yes, I think that now we really need to level the playing field, and whatever the sales tax is on that local book purchase or that local internet laptop purchase should also result if I buy a Dell computer online. If I pay it at Best Buy, I need to pay it if I buy direct online, just in order to make sure that local jobs are protected, and that and for that matter, to your point, it's also legitimate tax revenue, even-handedly collected for each state that does this. So I'm in favor of it.
So you don't think the playing field should be leveled?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there are other ways you could perhaps level the playing field. I have not looked into that at this point, but I feel that adding another tax at this point in time, with the economy as bad as it is a bad idea, and I've signed a no new tax pledge.
When is the best time? When would you agree to raising taxes? I mean,
I won't.
ever. For education?
Not unless, like I believe that we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. We have to address the spending before we even think about looking for new ways to get revenue. I've suggested selling some of the state land as a way of bringing in revenue. Charging prisoners for their own care like Arizona is doing. They get charged for everything out in Arizona. Our prisoners here are not charged that fee, that $5 fee that could help.
Actually, with all due respect, Bill Weld created a lot of headlines and created a lot of momentum when he was running for U.S. Senate against John Kerry, because he did, in fact, take TVs away from prisoners, and he did start to charge them. We are not a generous state where prisoners are concerned. We used to be, but that was pre-Bill Weld. Now we're actually pretty tough, with all due respect. And there is very little. Most of the people in our jails are poor, by the way. They don't have a lot of money, so there's not a lot of dough to be soaked up there, but we are not generous with prisoners. We don't even have rehabilitation programs for drug and drinking anymore. I mean, we've cut way back.
Should we have more of those?
Yes, sure we should. If you're in jail for a nonviolent offense, that's not to say that you don't deserve to be there. But you have to have, America is all about second chances. You can't cut rehabilitation programs to the bone and expect these people to do anything other than commit more crimes, and they all get out. And in fact, you see what's happening now with this terrible drug testing lab issue, releases of prisoners across the board. The mayor of Boston just asked for $16 million because as these folks hit the streets, we have to have some way of reintroducing them into society, or they're going to be burdens on our hands forever.
Does the governor bear responsibility for what happened at the Jamaica Plain State Police truck?
It's probably too far down the pecking order, realistically, to hold him responsible. Annie Dukin, the individual involved, is sick. I mean, she is one demented person. To go into her work every day knowing that she was basically going to fabricate testing results. On the other hand, let's distribute a little.
There were
little.
other people in that department said that the culture was set, that they had to that they had to get these cases done rapidly, and
right.
So if they were cutting corners.
I'll tell you, there's no question. It's not. It was. I don't think it was, with all due respect, I don't think it was rapidity. It was staffing levels. You know, you get what you pay for, and everything comes around in the end. We've been cutting jobs. I just mentioned 15% fewer state employees than was the case in 2007. Anytime, that means cutting staffing levels. You know, this is a very human story. These job reductions aren't magical. The jobs were cut at places like the drug testing lab, and the people who held those jobs were then under pressure to do more with less. At some point, you pay the piper. You cut jobs so you don't have enough people teaching, the kids aren't going to learn as much. You cut jobs so you don't have as much health care, people are going to get sicker. You cut jobs in the lab, you go too radical, as Sandi would like us to go, cutting the income tax, you're going to pay the piper.
Too radical when you cut jobs.
Well, when you compare me to him, I guess perhaps that would be fair for him to be able to try to make that claim. I really believe that the government's role has expanded far beyond what it needs to be. We disagree with this view. I think that government has a limited scope. It was supposed to take care of the infrastructure. It's supposed to provide us with safety for the citizens. But telling us that our children can't have sugar, taking away a child's lunch because it didn't contain, and this actually has happened, a state employee telling a child that they can't eat the lunch their mother provided, and instead giving them chicken nuggets and french fries as a healthy meal. The government has overreached its boundary, and I think it's time that we rein the government back in again. We're continually, we lost 2,600 jobs in June in the public sector, in the private sector. But yet, the state government added jobs, and it pads the employment rate, because we had a job loss in the private sector and we had an increase in the public sector. And so I think the government is growing, and the government is growing too much, and we can't afford it anymore. The MBTA, back to that again, we don't even know how much they get in pension payouts. We have no idea what we're paying in that.
Okay. Sandi, Jim, I want to just mention that I've read stories in the Lowell Sun about the unemployment rate, which fluctuates every month, down or up. And the standard analysis, in all the stories, not just the Sun's, but across, and I think this is true, is that employment in the private sector has actually blipped up during this very slow, painful recovery. Employment in the public sector has continued to go down because tax collections have continued to go down. So the number of jobs in state employees in Massachusetts, as I've indicated, is 15% less in 2012. By the way, in October of 2012, than in October of 2007. So the first point is that private sector jobs have gone up, which is what you hope for. Public sector jobs have not gone up because our tax collections continue to be down. So Sandi is wrong when she says government is bigger. It's actually smaller. And by the way, let me just say, in addition to, I'm sorry.
The budget doesn't say it's smaller. I mean, the
no,
pension
that's
obligation.
Remember, that's
outlays
pension,
to the
they
just
sector.
had to do pension reforms. They did the EBT card reform.
Yes.
I mean, it seems like we're reforming
everything.
everything.
Well, right, because
we
we're
are
in
generous.
trouble. No, we're not particularly generous, but we are in trouble. We're in trouble because because everybody is my age and your age. It's an aging baby boomer thing. The reason pensions are going up isn't because the individual pensions across the board, on average, are generous. Pension costs are going up because a lot of people our age are starting to retire. And it's a problem for the private sector, it's a problem for the public sector, and it's an inescapable problem.
I agree with you, but it's also because of the unfunded liabilities that we've created through the years, and now we're on the hook for
absolutely. What we should have done, and I'm not going to take responsibility, because I've been happily in the private sector for 18 years, so I'm not going to defend what was done in my absence, but there's no question that in the public and the private sector, we continue to hide the true dimensions of the pension problems. That's going to be an exploding issue. I'm going back there after 18 years with private sector perspective, determined to get out the truth of the full extent of these pension problems, because you're right, we will face a crisis. And I'll give you a particular example of.
Well,
we don't have time.
And I want to ask you one thing that has cropped up, and it was just refiled. A bill was refiled just last week, according to Beacon Hill roll call, to give free tuition to public colleges for the children of illegal immigrants. Okay, are you in favor of that?
Absolutely not. One of the reasons that I think we're in the mess we're in is we do so much for illegal immigrants here in the state already. They get free housing, they get free medical, they get EBT cards, and we all know about the EBT card fraud and abuse that's going on. Have you heard about the Obama phones? One woman here in Massachusetts was just saying she walks around with 7 of them in her purse. And that's all being paid for by we, the taxpayer. I think that government has outgrown its...
We don't buy phones for people.
In Massachusetts, we were giving away cars to the indigent as well as free phones.
We don't give away
automobiles?
They were giving them cars.
This is the first I've heard of that.
That was just a couple of years ago.
First I've heard of it too.
My point is, the pension system is the problem. I don't think the Founding Fathers ever intended for public employees, like legislators, to be full-time with a full-time pension. Only 11 states in the nation have a full-time legislature.
So you'd say that you'd limit yourself in terms of the number of terms that you'd serve?
I've already said that I would term limit. I also said I will not accept a pension. I said that when I ran last time as well.
Okay, I want him to answer this question on tuition payments to the children of illegal immigrants.
So I don't believe in tuition payments. Now, I could be wrong, Jim, but I have heard that the issue is whether kids 15 years old, 16 years old, whose parents came here illegally should be able to go to state colleges and universities and pay the in-state tuition charge if they actually live here.
Right.
And yes, I do believe, I'm not going to take a teenage kid whose parents came here illegally, and if they live in Massachusetts, say that I'm not going to treat them like another Massachusetts teenager. And by the way, my in-laws, who happen to be Jewish, came to this country illegally. My own ancestors, who happen to be Irish Catholic, several of them came under dubious circumstances. This whole country was built on illegal immigration. Let's be honest about it. And the truth is, people come here and they risk their lives to do it, usually in search of economic betterment for their family. We have to stop it at the borders. I'm not embracing cheating. I'm just noting that it happens despite what I might say on the matter.
I hope no one from ICE is watching this. You know,
from
ICE. You know, immigration. They'll be at your.
Well, they're all deceased. They're all deceased.
Quickly, I want to ask you about the 2 ballot questions that, and just yes or no. Question 2: physician-assisted suicide. Are you in favor or against?
I'm in favor.
Okay.
I'm against.
Okay. Medical marijuana.
I'm in favor.
You're in favor?
I'm against.
Okay. That closes
Not
out.
as if we're not giving people a choice.
Well, they're both ahead in the. I know that the polls have shown they're both ahead in the balloting. But all right, that was a very lively debate. And I really appreciate both candidates being so candid with their viewpoints. This is the portion now when both of them are going to give a up to 2-minute closing statement. Look in the corner and urge you to vote for them and on November 6th and why. So, Sandi, you go first. Look right at the camera and up to 2 minutes of closing statement.
Hi, I'm Sandi Martinez. As you've heard, we've had a spirited discussion tonight. Note the differences between us are stark and clear, and you will have a decision to make on November 6th. I was born in Waltham. I grew up in Chelmsford. I've raised my 4 children there. I have 2 sons that are Marines, a daughter who served in the Air Force for 8 years, and my father gave his life in the Air Force when I was a young child. I started my own IT consulting business to help my family when my children were small, so I could be a stay-at-home mom and also work at the same time. And I have met an awful lot of you as I've gone door knocking throughout the whole district. I've listened to your concerns. I've heard you. I've listened to you complaining about, not complaining, but talking about how the taxes, the economy is hurting you, how your children can't find jobs, and how you're worried about your future for your children, your grandchildren, and even for your own retirement. I hope to be a voice on Beacon Hill to represent you. I would ask for you to just consider going to my website, seeing what else I stand for. I've pledged to serve you, the people, and I just thank you for listening tonight and hope that you will vote for me on November 6th.
Mike, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Jim. I want to thank the Lowell Sun for staging this debate, and I also want to thank Sandi Martinez, my Republican opponent, who is clearly a very articulate and very smart proponent of a point of view with which I do disagree. I've been in the private sector for 18 years doing healthcare and computers, working with organizations like the Greater Lowell VNA, and then moving on to ask the question, how can we use the internet and computers to help people stay well when they deal with chronic illnesses or conditions like asthma, diabetes, hypertension, chronic heart failure. I know the healthcare issue very well, and I propose to go back to the legislature, bringing this 18 years of experience in two growth sectors of the state's economy, healthcare and computers and technology. I propose to go back to the state Senate with the perspective born of firsthand knowledge of those job-creating parts of the state's economy. But it's true that I also have public sector experience. I served in the state Senate once before, from 1986 to 1994. I ran for governor in the Democratic primary in 1994. I do know how government works. When I was there, I was named the Legislator of the Year by the Massachusetts Disabilities Council. We haven't talked about people with emotional, mental, and physical disabilities, but I care a great deal about that issue. I think those line items in state budgets have been cut to the bones, and I care about that question a great deal. I care about restoring the funding for state public higher ed. I'd like to see the UMass system, the community college system, and the state colleges do much better than they've done lately. We're actually fourth from the bottom in terms of the legislature's funding of state public higher ed, so we're very, very stingy where that is concerned. We do have a smaller state government today than we did have before the fiscal crash in 2008. So we haven't been profligate with people's money. I will, though, make the argument that there are times when the state has to step in. I think about the universities, I think about mass transit, I think about local roads and bridges and the degree to which they're corroding. There are times when government has a role to play, and I want to see it play that role competently, honestly, and effectively. So I ask for your support as somebody who has decades of private sector experience, but significant public sector experience as well. The vote, of course, is on November 6th. My name is Mike Barrett. I'm the Democratic nominee for state Senate in the district that includes Chelmsford, Carlisle, Bedford, and again, I want to thank Lowell Sun, my opponent, for this opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you very much. That concludes our forum today, and we have several more debates coming up this week. Please look at the schedule on our website, lowellsun.com, and thank you very much, Sandi Martinez and Mike Barrett.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Excellent moderating.
Thank you.